4 generations of my family have tilled this land, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I decided to restore that forgotten well on the north pasture. What seemed like a simple restoration project revealed a hidden chamber, dating back to the Civil War, and the gold coins I discovered inside didn't just unearth a forgotten fortune, they exposed a conspiracy that rewrites the history of our nation's darkest conflict. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Thomas Blackwell, and for over a century, my family has farmed these 180 acres in the rolling hills of Western Virginia. This land has witnessed the birth of a nation, the tragedy of civil war, and countless seasons of growth and harvest. But beneath its surface, it held a secret, one that powerful people have already tried to take from me. The irony isn't lost on me that after years of struggling to keep this farm afloat, salvation came not from my crops or livestock, but from a crumbling stone well I nearly filled with concrete last spring. Had I known what lay hidden in its depths, perhaps I wouldn't have hesitated so long to explore it. Then again, some discoveries come precisely when they're meant to, not a moment sooner. The trouble began last October as I faced another disappointing harvest. 3 years of unpredictable weather patterns had devastated my crops. First came the unprecedented floods that washed away my corn before it could take root, then the early frost that killed my soybeans. This past season brought drought so severe it left the ground cracked like ancient pottery. No matter what I planted or how I timed it, nature seemed determined to break both my spirit and my bank account. Each morning, I would check my mailbox with a growing sense of dread. The letters from Piedmont Bank grew increasingly ominous, with the most recent notice giving me just 60 days to make good on my payments or lose everything. The farm that my great-grandfather purchased in 1896, that my grandfather expanded during the Depression, that my father modernized in the 1980s, all of it would be auctioned to the highest bidder if I couldn't find a way to save it. Meanwhile, Westridge Development Corporation, the real estate conglomerate buying up struggling farms throughout the county to build luxury countryside estates, had already made 4 offers on my property. Each offer was higher than the last, as if they could smell my desperation growing. Their representative, a slick-talking man named James Harrington, had taken to stopping by unannounced, his expensive SUV kicking up dust on my gravel driveway as he arrived with yet another folder of paperwork. "The market won't wait forever, Thomas," he'd say, leaning against my porch railing without invitation. "And neither will Piedmont Bank." The latest envelope contained architectural renderings of what they called Blackwell Estates, 75. Cookie-cutter mansions with artificial ponds where generations of my family had grown food to feed the nation. Just seeing my family name on their glossy brochure made my stomach turn. What made the situation even more bitter was that my farm was struggling despite being situated on what was once considered historically significant land. My grandmother used to sit in her rocking chair on summer evenings, pointing toward the ancient well on the north pasture as she told me stories about how our property had once been a crucial supply depot during the Civil War. "This land remembers every footstep. Tommy," she would tell me, her eyes distant as if seeing ghosts walking across our fields. "The soil keeps secrets of every soldier, every coin, every whispered plan that passed through here. Some say there's Union gold still hidden somewhere on this property, gold that disappeared when Lee surrendered." I had always dismissed her tales as the fanciful stories of an old woman who had read too many historical novels. Gold hidden on our property? If that were true, surely someone would have found it in the century and a half since the war ended. My father had never believed the stories either, focusing instead on the practical business of farming. The well. itself had been abandoned for decades, deemed too old and dangerous to use once my grandfather had installed modern plumbing in the 1950s. But as I faced the imminent loss of everything my family had built, I found myself drawn to the stories I had once dismissed. Not because I truly believed I would find Civil War gold, but because reconnecting with my family's history gave me comfort as I prepared to lose it all. If nothing else, I could document and preserve the stories before the bulldozers came to erase every trace of the Blackwell legacy. The well sat in a far corner of the north pasture, partially hidden by overgrown blackberry bushes and a massive oak tree that had grown so close its roots had begun to displace some of the stone structure. I had avoided this section of the property for years, focusing my limited resources on the more productive fields. The wooden cover that once protected the opening had long since rotted away, replaced by my father with a makeshift barrier of chicken wire and corrugated metal to prevent animals from falling in. As I approached it that October morning, pruning shears in hand to clear away the brambles, I had no grand expectations. At most, I thought I might find some interesting stonework worth photographing, maybe an old bucket or tool that could become a conversation piece in whatever small apartment I'd end up in after the farm was sold. I certainly wasn't expecting to uncover a mystery that would put me at odds with some of the most powerful people in the state. After clearing away the decades of growth that had nearly swallowed the well, I removed the rusted metal covering. The opening was about 4 feet in diameter, lined with fieldstone that had been carefully fitted together by skilled hands long before my family owned this land. Shining my flashlight down, I could see water reflecting about 30 feet below. The surface dark and still like polished obsidian. What caught my attention, however, was something unusual about the stonework about 10 feet down. While the upper portion of the well consisted of roughly circular layers of stone, there appeared to be a section where the pattern changed, a deliberate alteration that my flashlight beam couldn't fully illuminate from my vantage point. That deviation from the expected was the first thread of a mystery that would soon unravel centuries of deception, challenge the accepted history of the Civil War, and potentially save my family's legacy, if I could keep control of what I was about to discover. But powerful forces were already converging, determined to claim my discovery as their own, and rebury secrets that had remained hidden for over 150 years. The Blackwell farm has stood as a landmark in Augusta County for generations. My great-grandfather, James Blackwell, purchased these 180 acres in 1896 after returning from the Spanish-American War with a determination to put down roots. He was the son of a tenant farmer who had spent his childhood moving from property to property across Virginia, never owning the land he worked. "Land is the only thing worth fighting for," he would tell my grandfather. "Land endures when men don't." That philosophy became our family's cornerstone. Through world wars, the Great Depression, and the agricultural revolution, the Blackwells remained, adapting and persevering when many neighboring farms were sold off or abandoned. My grandfather, Samuel Blackwell, expanded the property during the 1930s when land prices collapsed, adding the north pasture and the old well that came with it. My father, William Blackwell, modernized our operations in the 1980s, investing in irrigation systems and machinery that allowed us to compete with larger farms. I still remember the pride in his eyes when he brought home our first new tractor, a gleaming green John Deere that seemed impossibly powerful to my 8-year-old eyes. "This land feeds people, Tommy," he'd tell me as we walked the rows of corn together. "Never forget that what we do here matters." I took over the farm after Dad's unexpected heart attack 12 years ago. At 32, I wasn't fully prepared to shoulder the responsibility, but the land doesn't wait for you to be ready. The seasons come and go regardless of your personal circumstances, and the crops needed tending. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Those first years were challenging, but profitable. I expanded our operations to include organic vegetables for the growing farm-to-table restaurant scene in Charlottesville and Staunton. We hosted school groups and became something of a local educational resource about sustainable farming. My wife, Sarah, started a small farm store where we sold homemade preserves and honey from our own beehives. For a while, it seemed like we had found our niche in the changing agricultural landscape. Then came the string of environmental disasters that scientists attributed to climate change, but locals simply called bad luck. The 100-year flood that became a 5-year flood, the unseasonable freezes, the summer drought that left the ground so parched it wouldn't absorb water when the rains finally came. Each season brought a new challenge that our farming forefathers had never faced, and our resources were stretched thinner with each passing year. Sarah left 3 years ago, tired of the struggle and uncertainty. I couldn't blame her. Watching something you love slowly die takes a toll on the soul. She's teaching elementary school in Richmond now, happier in a job with regular hours and a steady paycheck. We talk occasionally, mostly about practical matters related to the divorce, but I can hear the concern in her voice when she asks about the farm. She knows what this land means to me, knows that losing it would be like losing a part of myself. Now it's just me, the land, and a mountain of debt that grows with each failed harvest. I've sold equipment, reduced the acreage under cultivation, and taken odd construction jobs during the off-season, but nothing has been enough to stem the tide of red ink. The last 3 years have been a slow-motion drowning, watching the water rise inch by inch while my options for escape gradually disappeared. My neighbor to the west, Frank Miller, surrendered to the inevitable last year. His family had farmed, alongside mine for almost as long, 160 years of shared fences, borrowed equipment, and mutual support through good harvests and bad. I watched from my kitchen window as he signed the final paperwork, transferring his property to Westridge Development. His shoulders were slumped in defeat as he handed over the deed to 3 generations of Miller family history in exchange for a check that might last him a decade if he was careful. The bulldozers arrived the next morning, uprooting century-old oak trees and demolishing the farmhouse his grandfather had built by hand after returning from World War II. Within a week, the contours of the land itself had been altered. Artificial hills created where once there had been gentle slopes perfect for winter sledding. The night they tore down the old Miller barn, I sat on my porch, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, listening to the crash of timber and the rumble of heavy machinery working under floodlights. The farm store we had so lovingly built together now stood empty, the shelves that once held Sarah's preserves collecting dust. I'd meant to repurpose the space, but never found the energy or purpose to do so. It had become a monument to better days, a place I avoided as I went about my increasingly sparse farm chores. My daily routine had narrowed to the essentials: tend to the few animals I had left, check on the limited crops I could still afford to plant, and spend hours at the kitchen table poring over bills I couldn't pay and bank statements that grew more ominous by the month. Some days I wondered if I was merely prolonging the inevitable, if my stubborn refusal to accept reality was just another form of self-torture. The community that had once been the backbone of rural life had frayed as well. The old farming families were disappearing one by one, replaced by wealthy weekenders from Washington, D.C. and Richmond who wanted country views without country work. The general store where farmers had gathered for morning coffee closed 2 years ago, replaced by an artisanal cheese shop catering to tourists. Even the church where Blackwells had worshipped for generations was struggling to maintain its congregation. Yet despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to sign the papers James Harrington kept bringing to my door. The thought of Westridge, bulldozers tearing through my fields, of strangers building vacation homes where my father had taught me to drive a tractor, of my family's history being reduced to a marketing gimmick for luxury homes. It was more than I could bear. The land deserved better. My ancestors deserved better. So I kept fighting, kept planting, kept hoping for a miracle that seemed increasingly unlikely as my notice of foreclosure moved from 90 days to 60. Each morning I would walk the property. At dawn, touching the trees my grandfather had planted, running my hands through soil my family had tended for generations, saying goodbye to it piece by piece, while still searching for a way to save it. It was during one of these morning walks that I found myself standing before the old well again, staring down into its depths, as if it might offer some answer to my troubles. My grandmother's stories about Civil War gold came back to me, no longer seeming quite so fanciful in my desperate state. What if, by some remote chance, there was truth to those old tales? What if the deviation I'd noticed in the stonework was more than just an irregularity? The rational part of my mind dismissed the thought immediately. Searching for legendary gold was the act of a desperate man clinging to fairy tales rather than facing reality. But perhaps that's exactly what I had become, desperate enough to chase shadows, to grasp at the thinnest threads of hope rather than accept the loss of everything I loved. And so, with nothing left to lose but time, I decided to investigate the old well more thoroughly. I would need equipment, ropes, a harness, better lights. It would be dangerous work, descending into a structure that had stood for perhaps 2 centuries without maintenance. But danger seemed a small price to pay for even the slimmest chance of salvation. The morning after my decision to explore the well, I woke to the sound of tires on gravel. Through my bedroom window, I saw James Harrington's black Cadillac Escalade pulling up to my house, right on schedule for his weekly attempt to get me to sign away my heritage. I pulled on my work boots and braced myself for another uncomfortable conversation. Harrington stepped out looking like he'd just walked off a real estate billboard. Crisp blue suit, expertly trimmed salt and pepper hair, and that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was holding a new folder, thicker than the previous ones, and a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. "Morning, Thomas," he called. "I've got good news. Westridge has authorized me to increase our offer by another 15%. He handed me a document with a number that would have seemed astronomical 3 years ago. Now it just looked like the price tag on my failure. They're also willing to include a heritage clause," he continued. "We'll preserve the original farmhouse as a community center for the development. Your family name will be prominently featured." "And what about the land itself?" I asked. "What about the soil my family has worked for 4 generations?" Harrington's smile tightened slightly. "The topography will naturally need to be optimized for residential development, but we're planning a community garden area where residents can grow their own vegetables." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. 180 acres of fertile farmland reduced to hobby garden plots for board executives wanting to grow heirloom tomatoes on weekends. "I need more time, James," I said, handing back the folder. "Time isn't on your side here, Thomas. Piedmont Bank has already begun processing the foreclosure paperwork. You have, 57 days now?" 58, I corrected, though the difference hardly mattered. "The offer stands for 1 week, he said, handing me his business card, identical to the dozen others he'd given me. "Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." As his Escalade disappeared down my driveway, I sat silently. I had less than 2 months to come up with nearly $300,000, or I would lose everything. The increased offer from Westridge was tempting. It would clear my debts and leave enough to start over somewhere else. But every time I considered accepting, I heard my father's voice. "This land feeds people, Tommy. What we do here matters. My phone rang, temporarily distracting me. It was Ellen from the bank, reminding me about tomorrow's property inspection. The appraiser will be out at 2 p.m. You should know that any deficiencies in the property condition will affect the valuation. Translation: they were looking for reasons to lower the property's worth, to justify giving me less credit for my equity when they eventually seized the farm. I spent the rest of the morning gathering equipment for my descent into the well. An old climbing harness from my college days, ropes that were still sturdy enough to support my weight, a battery-powered LED lantern, work gloves to protect my hands from the stone. As I organized these items, I realized I was investing precious time and energy in what was almost certainly a fool's errand. The rational part of my brain knew that hunting for mythical Civil War gold was absurd. There was no treasure hidden on my property. If there had been, someone would have found it long ago, yet some irrational spark of hope had ignited within me, and I couldn't bring myself to extinguish it. Perhaps it wasn't even about finding gold, but about connecting with my family's history before it was erased by bulldozers and luxury homes. At noon, I drove into town for additional supplies. As I waited at the checkout in Mason's Hardware, I overheard two men talking about the latest sale to Westridge Development. Heard they bought the old Peterson place yesterday, one said. 300 acres, been in that family since before the Civil War. Can't blame them for selling, the other replied. Peterson's boy moved to California years ago, no interest in farming. Driving back to my property, I passed 3 separate construction sites where farms had once stood. Concrete. Foundations were being poured for homes larger than my entire farmhouse. Signs advertised country living just minutes from city convenience and luxury rural estates starting at $750,000. By the time I returned home, my resolve had strengthened. Even if there was no gold, I needed to try. I needed to know that I had explored every possibility before surrendering my family's legacy to become another Westridge development. As I approached the well with my equipment, the rumble of an engine caught my attention. A white Ford F-150 with Virginia Historical Society emblazoned on the door was coming up my driveway. This was unusual. I hadn't requested any historical assessment, and unexpected visitors had become rare since the farm's decline. The truck parked beside my weathered pickup, and a slender woman in her 40s emerged. She wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt with the Historical Society logo, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She approached with confident strides, extending her hand as she reached me. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm Dr. Rebecca Morgan. From the Virginia Historical Society. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I shook her hand reluctantly, conscious of my work gloves and the climbing harness slung over my shoulder. "Just some maintenance work. What can I do for you, Dr. Morgan?" She smiled, but her eyes were assessing the equipment I'd gathered. "We're conducting a survey of Civil War-era structures in Augusta County before they're lost to development. Your property is listed in our archives as containing several features of historical interest, including an original well that may date to the pre-war period." My grandmother's stories flashed through my mind, raising immediate suspicion. The timing seemed too convenient. Just as I was preparing to explore the well, a historian appears specifically interested in it. "How did you know about the well?" I asked, making no effort to hide my wariness. "It's not visible from the road." Dr. Morgan produced a tablet from her messenger bag and pulled up an old map. "We have surveys dating back to 1855 that mark several structures on this property, including a well in this approximate location. We're documenting these features before they're potentially lost to development." She glanced meaningfully toward the construction equipment visible in the distance on what used to be the Miller farm. "I heard your property may be facing foreclosure," she continued with practiced sympathy. The Historical Society is particularly interested in documenting sites that might soon be inaccessible to researchers. The mention of foreclosure stung. News travels fast, I muttered. In small communities, always. She nodded toward my equipment. Were you planning to examine the well? I'd be very interested in joining you. The Society can provide documentation. That might be useful if you're considering applying for historical preservation status. Something in her too eager tone kept my suspicions alive. Historical preservation status sounded like a potential lifeline. Properties with significant historical value could sometimes receive protection from development, but her sudden appearance felt orchestrated. I'm afraid today isn't good, I said, deliberately vague. I'm just doing some basic safety work, making sure it's not a hazard. Dr. Morgan's smile tightened slightly. I understand. Perhaps I could come back tomorrow. The Society is particularly interested in structures that might have Civil War connections. There are records suggesting this area may have been used by both Union and Confederate forces for supply storage. Now my grandmother's stories about hidden gold seemed less fanciful. If the Historical Society had records indicating military activity on the property, perhaps there was truth to the tales of Union payroll gold being concealed here. Tomorrow won't work either, I said. I have a bank appraiser coming. Ah, her expression shifted to one of understanding. All the more reason for the Society to document historical features quickly. Properties with confirmed historical significance can sometimes qualify for preservation grants or tax benefits. She offered her card, cream-colored with an embossed state seal. Please call me when you're ready for a proper historical assessment. These old structures often contain valuable historical artifacts that should be properly documented and preserved. As she returned to her truck, I noticed her making a phone call before she'd even closed the door. Something about the entire interaction felt wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The Historical Society was a legitimate organization, and their interest in documenting historic structures before development wasn't unusual. Yet the timing and Dr. Morgan's specific interest in the well-raised red flags. I waited until her truck disappeared down my driveway before returning to my preparations, now feeling a new urgency. If others were interested in the well, I needed to investigate it immediately, before more uninvited visitors arrived. I was securing the rope to my tractor when another vehicle approached. A black Chevy Suburban with tinted windows and government plates. It parked where Dr. Morgan's truck had been minutes earlier, and two men in suits emerged, looking distinctly out of place against the rural backdrop. The older man approached first, his grey hair cropped short in a military style, his posture rigid despite his civilian clothes. "Mr. Thomas Blackwell?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "That's me," I confirmed, straightening up and removing my work gloves. "Something I can help you with?" He produced a credentials wallet and flipped it open briefly, too quickly for me to read it properly. "Agent Daniel Harlow, Department of Treasury. This is my colleague, Agent Wesley." The younger man nodded but remained silent. "Treasury agents on my farm." The mention of that specific department sent my thoughts racing back to my grandmother's stories about Civil War gold. "What brings Treasury agents to a failing farm?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "We're conducting an investigation into potential historical artifacts in this region," Harlow explained, his eyes darting to the well and the equipment I'd assembled. "Specifically items that might fall under federal jurisdiction due to their connection to Union Army assets from the Civil War period." My suspicion deepened. First the historian, now federal agents, all on the same day I decided to explore the well. This couldn't be coincidence. "I'm afraid I don't know anything about historical artifacts," I said carefully. This is just an old farm that's been in my family for generations. Agent Harlow's expression remained impassive. We have intelligence suggesting this property may contain items of significant historical and monetary value belonging to the federal government, specifically gold coins from a Union Army payroll that went missing in 1864. My heart raced. My grandmother's stories weren't just family legends. They were apparently true enough for the federal government to investigate over 150 years later. That's the first I'm hearing about any missing Union gold, I lied, grateful for my poker face, and through years of negotiating with grain buyers and equipment dealers. Perhaps, Harlow conceded, though his tone suggested disbelief. Nevertheless, we'd like to conduct a search of your property, specifically focusing on that well you appear to be examining. I crossed my arms. Do you have a warrant? The question clearly annoyed him. We're conducting a preliminary investigation. A formal search warrant can be arranged if necessary, but we hoped you'd cooperate voluntarily. After all, any Union Army assets discovered would legally belong to the federal government, regardless of where they're found. There it was. The real purpose of their visit. They weren't just investigating, they were laying claim to anything I might discover. I'm afraid this isn't a good time, I said, echoing my response to Dr. Morgan. I'm preparing for a bank appraisal tomorrow, and I have work that needs to be done. Agent Wesley spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly soft. Mr. Blackwell, cooperation with our investigation could be beneficial to you. The Treasury Department has programs to reward citizens who assist in recovering lost government assets. A finder's fee? I asked skeptically. Something like that, Harlow confirmed. Certainly enough to help with your current financial difficulties. The fact that they knew about my financial situation was unsettling. These weren't random agents following up on a historical lead. They had researched me specifically. I appreciate the offer, I said, but as I mentioned, this isn't a good time. If you'd like to come back with a warrant, that's your right. Until then, I have work to do. Harlow's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing frustration. Mr. Blackwell, I don't think you understand the seriousness of this matter. Interference with a federal investigation or attempting to conceal government property carries significant penalties. And conducting searches without a warrant carries its own penalties, I countered. Now, unless you're here to arrest me, I need to get back to work. The agents exchanged glances, clearly unused to resistance. We'll be in touch very soon, Mr. Blackwell, Harlow said, handing me his card. In the meantime, I strongly advise you against any unauthorized excavation of historical sites on this property. As they drove away, I noticed them parking just beyond my property line, the Suburban positioned where they could observe the well from a distance. They weren't leaving, just retreating to watch and wait. First, the developer, then the historian. Now federal agents, 3 different entities, all suddenly interested in my apparently worthless farm. The convergence couldn't be coincidence. Something about that well had attracted attention from powerful forces, all arriving just as I was, on the verge of discovery. I looked at the equipment I'd gathered, then back at the agents watching from the road. If I proceeded with my exploration now, I'd be doing so under their surveillance. Yet delaying might mean losing my only chance to discover what lay hidden. Before others took control, with the bank's appraiser coming tomorrow and foreclosure looming, time was running out. Whatever secrets that well contained had waited over 150 years to be discovered. Now it seemed everyone wanted to be the one to find them. But this was still my land, at least for the next 58 days, and that well belonged to my family. Whatever it contained, I had earned the right to discover it first. That evening I drove into town to visit my Uncle Elijah. At 87, he was the oldest living Blackwell, my grandfather's younger brother, and the family's unofficial historian. He resided at Oakwood Assisted Living, where he'd moved 5 years ago after a stroke left him unable to live independently. I found Uncle Elijah in the community room, hunched over a chessboard, handily defeating another resident despite having a use of only his right arm. "Tommy," he smiled, "something's troubling you. Pull up a chair and tell me what's got you looking like you've seen the tax assessor." I sat across from him. "Uncle Elijah, how much do you know about the old well on the North pasture?" His gnarled fingers, which had been reaching for a pawn, froze mid-air. "Why do you ask?" I explained the day's events, my decision to explore the well, the visits from the historian and treasury agents, their specific interest in Civil War artifacts. "Let's go to my room," he said gravely. "Some stories shouldn't be told where just anyone might hear them." In his private room, he directed me to remove a battered leather portfolio from the top shelf. Inside was a collection of yellowed documents, newspaper clippings, and handwritten letters. "The well didn't originally belong to our family," he began, selecting a faded survey map dated 1855. "It was part of the Caldwell plantation before the war. The property was divided and sold off after Richmond fell. Your great-grandfather James bought our section in 1896, but by then the stories were already circulating." He handed me a newspaper clipping from 1879 with the headline, "Missing Union Gold Still Unaccounted For." The article described how a Union payroll shipment containing gold coins worth approximately $150,000 had disappeared in Augusta County in 1864. The official story was that Confederate raiders captured the shipment. Elijah continued, "But no Confederate records ever mentioned it, and the gold never surfaced in Richmond." He passed me a handwritten letter dated 1897 from my great-grandfather, "Purchased the old Caldwell well and surrounding acres. The locals avoid it, claiming it's haunted by the spirits of soldiers. Nonsense, of course, but it keeps trespassers away while I investigate certain rumors about its history. If what I suspect is true, our family's fortunes may soon change dramatically." "James was obsessed with the well," Elijah explained. "On his deathbed in 1932, he told my father something. Strange, he said, the key is in the pattern. Count 13 stones down, then look for the mark of the eagle." 13 stones down. That's approximately where I noticed the change in the stonework pattern, I said. Elijah nodded. "Your grandfather Samuel became interested in the well. Again, during World War II, federal agents actually visited the farm, instructing him to focus on crop production for the war effort." "Federal agents," I repeated, "like the ones who visited today." He pulled out a final document, a hand-drawn diagram of the well's interior. "Your grandfather made this. He believed the well contained a hidden side chamber, accessible through a movable section of the wall." I studied the diagram, noting areas where the measurements indicated inconsistencies, places where space was unaccounted for, suggesting hollow areas behind the visible walls. "The Treasury agents who came today, they knew about the gold," I said. "But how? The government has longer memories and better archives than most people realize. If Union gold went missing, they would have records. They might have been monitoring properties in the area for generations, but why show up today specifically? Their timing suggests they have inside information," Elijah admitted. "Someone knew you were planning to explore the well today." "They've been watching me," I realized, "monitoring my activities, maybe even my communications." He gripped my arm with surprising strength. "Tommy, listen carefully. If you find anything in that well, you must be extremely cautious about who you tell. The government will claim ownership of any military assets, developers will use it as leverage, and collectors will try to acquire pieces before they're officially documented." "What should I do?" I asked. "Document everything meticulously, create evidence that cannot be disputed or erased, and most importantly, secure whatever you find in a location only you know about, at least until you can consult with an attorney who specializes in historical artifacts." He handed me his diagram of the well. "Take this. It might help you locate the entrance to the hidden chamber." Your grandfather believed the eagle mark would be subtle, perhaps just a few scratches in, the stone that would go unnoticed unless you were specifically looking for it. As I prepared to leave, Elijah caught my hand. Tommy, whatever you find down there belongs to our family by right of discovery, regardless of what the government claims. That land has been Blackwell land for 4 generations. The stories, the history, the secrets, they're part of our heritage. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with visions of hidden chambers, ancient coins, and the convergence of powerful forces on my struggling farm. Rain began around midnight, a steady downpour that drummed against the roof and windows. By 4 a.m., I abandoned any pretense of rest and made a pot of strong coffee. The kitchen table was still covered with Uncle Elijah's documents and my grandfather's diagram. In the harsh light of my overhead fixture, the whole scenario seemed increasingly far-fetched. Was I really planning to descend into a potentially dangerous well based on family legends and a century-old drawing? Was I truly believing that gold had remained undiscovered for over 150 years, waiting specifically for me to find it at my moment of greatest need? It sounded like the desperate fantasy it probably was. I called Sarah. Despite our separation, she remained the most level-headed person I knew, and I needed a reality check. She answered groggily on the 4th ring. "Tom, it's the middle of the night. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, suddenly aware of how absurd my situation would sound. "Sorry to wake you, I needed someone to talk to." She was silent for a moment. "Is this about the foreclosure? James Harrington called me yesterday, asked if I could help you see reason about the Westridge offer." "He called you?" My frustration flared. "He had no right to drag you into this. He said he was concerned about you, that you've been acting erratically, refusing reasonable offers, talking about finding some kind of buried treasure instead of facing reality." So Harrington knew about the well too. The circle of people monitoring my activities was apparently wider than I'd thought. "Tom?" Sarah prompted when I didn't respond. "What's really going on?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The historical anomalies I'd noticed, the visits from the historian and treasury agents, the documents Uncle Elijah had shared. As I spoke, I could hear how unhinged it all sounded, like the ramblings of a man who'd chosen delusion over accepting failure. When I finished, Sarah was quiet for so long I thought we'd lost the connection. "You think I'm crazy," I finally said. "No," she replied carefully. "I think you're a Blackwell, and Blackwells are nothing if not stubborn when it comes to that land." She paused. "But Tom, even if, and that's a big if, there is something valuable in that well, you need to consider what happens next. The government will claim it, or you'll be tied up in legal battles for years. Meanwhile, the bank isn't going to wait." "No," I admitted, "but I have to try. This farm is all I have left." "That's not true," she said softly. "You have options, you have skills, you have people who care about you. The farm is just land, Tom." "It's not just land," I countered, more sharply than I intended. "It's my heritage. It's 4 generations of Blackwells who worked and sacrificed. It's everything my family built." "And what has it cost you?" she asked, her voice still gentle but insistent. "Our marriage, your health. Don't think I haven't noticed how exhausted you sound these days. Your financial security." "At what point?" "Do you say enough?" Her words hit home harder than I wanted to admit. The farm had indeed cost me my marriage, though we'd both pretended it was about other things. The stress of failing harvests, mounting debt, and 80-hour work weeks had hollowed out our relationship until there was nothing left but shared history and mutual resentment. "I can't give up without knowing," I said finally. "I need to check the well. If there's nothing there, then I'll call Harrington. I'll take the offer. But I need to know first." Sarah sighed a sound I recognized from countless similar conversations during our marriage. Promise me you'll be careful. That well has been sitting there for over a century. It's not worth risking your life for. I promise. And Sarah, thank you for answering, for listening. I'll always answer, Tom. That hasn't changed. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table watching the eastern sky lighten almost imperceptibly through the rain. Sarah was right. About one thing, the farm had cost me dearly, yet I couldn't bring myself to regret those costs, not entirely. This land was woven into the fabric of who I was, who the Blackwells had always been. My gaze fell on a framed photograph on the wall. My father standing proudly beside our first modern tractor, his arm around my teenage shoulders. His expression conveyed absolute certainty that he was passing on something of value, something worth preserving. How could I be the one to break that chain? Yet practicality demanded consideration. Even if I found Union gold, the legal battles would be complex and protracted. The federal government would assert ownership, scholars would demand access for research, and the media attention would bring complications I could scarcely imagine. Meanwhile, Piedmont Bank would continue its foreclosure process, unswayed by discoveries that might take years to convert to actual financial relief. The Westridge offer represented certainty, immediate debt resolution, and enough capital to start fresh. It meant surrendering my heritage, yes, but with dignity and financial security rather than the humiliation of foreclosure. As dawn finally broke, grey and dreary through the continuing rain, I made my decision. I would explore the well today, as planned, but with clear eyes about the potential outcomes. If I found nothing, I would accept the Westridge offer before it expired. If I found something of value, I would document it thoroughly, then consult with an attorney about the most strategic path forward, one that might include negotiating with Westridge from a position of greater strength. Either way, I would face reality rather than continuing to struggle against the inevitable tides of change that had transformed our agricultural community. The rain intensified as I donned waterproof gear and gathered my equipment. The well exploration would be more dangerous in these conditions, but I couldn't afford to wait. The bank appraiser would arrive at 2 p.m., and the Treasury agents might return with a warrant at any moment. Before heading out, I took one final action. I wrote a detailed letter documenting everything I'd learned about the well, the visits from various interested parties, and Uncle Elijah's historical documents. I sealed this in a waterproof container, along with copies of the most important papers and my grandfather's diagram, then hid it in the false bottom of my mother's old hope chest in the attic. If anything happened to me, Sarah would know where to look. I also set up my phone to automatically upload photos to my cloud storage account, ensuring that whatever I discovered would be documented beyond anyone's ability to suppress. The North. Pasture had transformed into a muddy quagmire, the normally firm soil now treacherous underfoot. I secured my equipment to a small garden cart and struggled to pull it through the mire, rain pelting my face despite the brim of my hat. The well itself had accumulated several inches of standing water around its rim, transforming it from merely dangerous to potentially lethal. Common sense urged retreat, postponement, until conditions improved. But the converging pressures, financial, legal, and now meteorological, created a now-or-never urgency I couldn't ignore. I secured my primary rope to the tractor I'd positioned nearby, tested it thoroughly, then attached a secondary safety line to a mature oak tree for redundancy. As I prepared to descend, headlights appeared on the access road leading to my property. A vehicle was approaching slowly through the downpour, its windshield wipers working frantically against the deluge. For a moment, I thought the Treasury agents had returned, but as it drew closer, I recognized Dr. Morgan's white Ford F-150 from the Historical Society. Her timing couldn't be coincidence. Someone was monitoring my movements, perhaps through satellite, imagery, or more direct surveillance. The thought was unsettling, but it only reinforced my determination to proceed immediately. I quickly covered my equipment with the tarp I'd brought in case of rain, making it appear I was merely protecting the well opening rather than preparing to explore it. By the time Dr. Morgan parked and approached, I was casually securing the tarp edges with rocks, as if merely performing routine maintenance. "Mr. Blackwell," she called, hurrying toward me through the rain, a large umbrella clutched in one hand and a leather satchel in the other. "I'm glad I caught you. I've brought some historical documents about your property that might interest you." "You're persistent, Dr. Morgan," I observed, straightening up to face her. "Especially considering the weather." She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "History doesn't wait for sunshine, Mr. Blackwell, especially when it might soon be buried under concrete foundations." Something in her tone, a hint of genuine concern beneath the professional demeanor, gave me pause. Perhaps I'd been too quick to assume everyone who showed interest in the well had ulterior motives. "What kind of documents?" I asked, allowing a hint of curiosity into my voice. "Original surveys from 1855, military correspondence referencing this area during the Civil War, and something I think you'll find particularly interesting, a journal entry from a Union quartermaster describing a secure repository established on the former Caldwell plantation." She held up her satchel enticingly. "Perhaps we could review them somewhere dry. Your house, maybe." The mention of the Caldwell plantation, the same property Uncle Elijah had referenced, was too specific to be coincidence. Dr. Morgan, clearly, knew more than she had initially revealed. The question was whether she was an ally or another adversary trying to claim what might lie hidden in the well. I glanced at my watch. The morning was slipping away, and with it my window of opportunity to explore the well before the bank appraiser arrived. "Tell me, Dr. Morgan," I said carefully, "why is the Historical Society suddenly so interested in my property? This well has been here for generations without attracting attention." Her professional veneer slipped slightly. "Not everyone at the Society shares my particular interest, Mr. Blackwell. I have my own reasons for being here, reasons that align with your interests more than you might think." She lowered her voice, despite the isolation of our location. "I know about the Treasury agents who visited yesterday. I know what they're looking for. And I know they have no intention of letting you benefit from anything found on your property." The rain pounded around us as I weighed my options, the well's dark opening nearby, representing both risk and possibility. Whatever I decided next would set in motion a chain of events that couldn't be undone. "You have 10 minutes, I said to Dr. Morgan, gesturing toward the equipment shed nearby. "Then I have work that won't wait." Inside the shed, she opened her satchel and removed several plastic-protected documents. "I'm not here in an official capacity for the Historical Society, though my credentials are genuine. I'm here because my great-grandfather was Sergeant William Morgan, Company B, 7th West Virginia Volunteer Infantry." She laid out weathered military documents, discharge papers for a Union soldier dated 1865. He was part of the escort for a payroll shipment that disappeared in this county in 1864. History records that he died in the Confederate raid that supposedly captured the gold, but that's not the truth. Next came a packet of letters, carefully preserved but clearly ancient. He survived. These letters to my great-grandmother prove it. I scanned the top letter, dated October 1864. "My dearest Margaret, events have transpired that make it impossible for me to return as planned. What history will record about the events of September 4th will not be the truth. In his final letter before his actual death in 1879, he wrote something specific about the missing payroll. She continued, "Here, the eagles rest 13 stones down, where water meets earth, but cannot enter. The true account remains with them, awaiting discovery by one who values truth above gold." The reference to eagles and 13 stones couldn't be coincidence. It matched precisely what Uncle Elijah had told me. "And you?" I asked bluntly. "What do you want from this?" "Historical truth," she said without hesitation. "My great-grandfather was branded a casualty of war at best, a deserter at worst. I want to clear his name and set the historical record straight." After she departed, I quickly resumed preparations for descent. The rain had slackened slightly, though dark clouds promised more to come. The well opening was approximately 4 feet in diameter. I secured my harness, double-checked both ropes, and attached the waterproof LED lantern to my belt. With a final glance around the empty pasture, I lowered myself into the well. The stonework provided decent footholds, and the rope system supported my weight effectively. Water trickled down the walls, making the stones slippery but not impassable. My lantern illuminated masterful stonework that had withstood centuries. At approximately 13 stones down, I paused to examine the wall more carefully. The stonework pattern did indeed change subtly at this level. To an untrained eye, it would appear unremarkable, but knowing what to look for made the distinction clear. I ran my fingers along each stone, searching for any marking that might resemble an eagle. After nearly 20 minutes of methodical examination, my light caught an almost imperceptible series of scratches on one particular stone, a simplified outline that, once seen, unmistakably suggested an eagle with outstretched wings. I pressed against the stone, then tried to shift it sideways and upward. Nothing happened. I examined the surrounding stones, noting slightly wider mortar gaps. Applying pressure to these stones in various combinations yielded no results. I tapped methodically along the wall, listening for any hollow sound. Most sections returned the solid thunk of stone against earth, but one area, approximately 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall, produced a distinctly different resonance. I reconsidered the reference to "where water meets earth but cannot enter" from Dr. Morgan's letter. The current water level was approximately 20 feet below my position. But what about the original water table? I examined the stonework more carefully, noting a subtle discoloration about 2 feet below my current position. A mineral deposit line that likely indicated a previous, higher water level. If this represented the original water line, then the area where water meets earth but cannot enter might be right at this boundary. I descended slightly, examining the stones at this level with renewed focus. There, partially obscured by mineral deposits, was a small indentation in the mortar between 2 stones, just large enough to insert several fingers. I tried pressing, pulling, and shifting in different directions. A movement combining pressure, inward followed by upward shift, finally produced results. A grinding sound of stone against stone, and a section of the wall shifted inward slightly. With additional pressure, the entire section slid sideways into a recessed track, revealing a dark opening beyond. My heart pounded as I directed my light into the space. A small chamber extended about 8 feet into the earth, its ceiling supported by heavy wooden beams. The floor was packed earth, remarkably dry, with several wooden crates positioned carefully throughout. I maneuvered myself through the opening. Inside, the chamber was just tall enough for me to stand upright. My light revealed that it was carefully engineered to remain stable and dry for extended periods. The first crate was approximately 2 feet square, its wood darkened with age but remarkably intact. With trembling hands, I released the latch and carefully lifted the lid. Gold gleamed in the beam of my lantern, double eagle coins, their surfaces untarnished, arranged in neat stacks. I lifted one carefully, examining the date. 1863. These were exactly what the Treasury Department was seeking, the missing Union payroll. But the crate contained something else beneath the layer of coins, leather portfolios and document cases, carefully wrapped in oilcloth that had protected them from moisture. The second crate contained more coins in individual leather pouches, along with several pistols and military insignia. The third held Confederate currency and bonds, alongside documents bearing the seal of the Confederate government. The final and largest crate required considerable effort to open. Inside was a leather-bound ledger titled simply The True Account and dated September 1864. Beneath it lay more documents, maps, and what appeared to be personal journals. I opened the ledger to its first page, where neat handwriting recorded, "I, Sergeant William Morgan, being of sound mind though troubled conscience, do hereby record the true events surrounding the disappearance of Union Army payroll shipment No. 37, entrusted to my care by the Department of Treasury." What follows contradicts the official record, but serves as my testimony before God and country. This wasn't just a hidden cache of gold, it was potentially evidence of a historical conspiracy involving both Union and Confederate forces. I checked my watch, shocked to discover I'd been in the well for nearly 2 hours. The bank appraiser would arrive in less than 3 hours. Using my phone, I photographed everything: the chamber, each crate and its contents, and several pages of key documents. The photos uploaded automatically to my cloud storage. As I prepared to exit with samples of my discovery, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Voices above at the well's opening. The voices above grew clearer as I stood frozen in the hidden chamber. I quickly closed the crates, securing their precious contents, then grabbed a small leather pouch of coins and several key documents, including the True Account ledger. These I stashed in the waterproof bag I'd brought for collecting samples. Whatever happened next, I needed evidence of what I'd discovered. I slipped back through the hidden doorway, carefully sliding the stone panel back into place, a task that proved far more difficult from this side. The grinding sound of stone against stone seemed deafening in the confined space of the well, and I paused periodically to listen for reactions from above. The voices continued, apparently unaware of my presence or the sounds of the closing chamber. Once the secret door was sealed, I clung to the rope in the main well shaft, turning off my lantern to avoid detection. From above, I could now make out 2 distinct voices, one I recognized as Agent Harlow from the Treasury Department, the other unfamiliar but authoritative. The judicial emergency provision allows for immediate execution of the warrant, the unfamiliar voice was saying. Blackwell's financial situation creates exigent circumstances, suggesting he might attempt to remove historical artifacts of significant value. "Sir, with respect, we don't have confirmation that anything's actually here," Harlow responded. "The Morgan woman's research is circumstantial at best, and Blackwell hasn't been near the well since yesterday." "His vehicle is here, Agent Harlow, but he's not in the house. The equipment by this well has been recently disturbed. He's either already made a discovery or is in the process of doing so. My options were limited. I could remain hidden in the well, hoping they'd eventually leave, but that seemed unlikely given their determination. I could announce my presence and face immediate confrontation, likely losing control of my discovery. Or I could attempt to exit the well and evade them, preserving my evidence and buying time to consult with legal representation. The decision was made for me when a powerful beam of light suddenly pierced the darkness from above, sweeping the well's interior. I pressed myself against the wall, but the light caught the glint of my harness buckle. "There's someone down there," Harlow called out. "Mr. Blackwell? This is Agent Harlow with the Treasury Department. We have a federal warrant to search this property. I need you to come up immediately." Denial was pointless. "I'm conducting maintenance on my well," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is private property, warrant or not. We can discuss jurisdictional matters once you're up here." the unfamiliar voice responded. "For now, your safety is our primary concern. This well structure appears unstable, especially with the recent rainfall." Their feigned concern was transparent, but I had little choice. I secured my sample bag to my belt beneath my rain jacket and began the ascent. The climb was more challenging than the descent, my muscles already fatigued from the exploration and tension radiating through my body. As I neared the top, hands reached down to assist me, not out of courtesy, but to ensure I couldn't retreat or discard anything. I emerged into the grey daylight to find not just Harlow and his companion, but 4 additional agents creating a perimeter around the well. Their Suburban was parked next to my tractor, and another government vehicle was approaching on the access road. "Mr. Blackwell," the unfamiliar man said, extending a credential wallet that identified him as Deputy Director Lawrence Collins of the Treasury Department's Historical Assets Division, a division I hadn't known existed until this moment. "We have a federal warrant authorizing search and seizure of any historical artifacts or currency related to the Union Army payroll shipment documented as missing on September 4, 1864. He handed me the warrant, a substantial document that appeared meticulously prepared, suggesting they'd been ready to execute it for some time and were merely waiting for the right moment. "What exactly are you expecting to find?" I asked, playing ignorant while acutely aware of the documents and coins concealed beneath my jacket. Collins regarded me with the calculated patience of a man accustomed to obtaining what he wants. "I think we both know the answer to that, Mr. Blackwell. The question is whether you've already found it." Before I could respond, the approaching vehicle arrived, a black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows. The driver's door opened to reveal James Harrington, the Westridge Development representative who'd been pressuring me to sell. His presence alongside Federal Treasury agents was unexpected and concerning. "Ah, Mr. Harrington," Collins acknowledged. "Perfect timing." "You two know each other?" I asked, though the answer was already evident in their comfortable familiarity. "The Treasury Department and Westridge Development have a mutual interest in this property," Collins explained smoothly. "Historical preservation and appropriate land utilization often go hand in hand." Harrington approached, his typical salesman demeanor replaced by something colder and more businesslike. "Thomas, this situation can still resolve favorably for everyone. Westridge's offer includes provisions for historical preservation of significant discoveries, while ensuring the property is developed to its highest potential." The implication was clear. They'd already divided my farm and its secrets between them before I'd even confirmed what lay in the well. The government would claim the gold and historical artifacts, while Westridge would acquire the land at a price that now seemed insultingly low, given what we all knew it contained. "I haven't found anything yet," I lied, buying time. "I was inspecting the well structure for safety concerns before the bank's appraiser arrives." Collins and Harrington exchanged skeptical glances. "Our warrant authorizes a thorough search," Collins reminded me. "Agent Harlow will accompany you to collect any equipment you've left in the well, and then our team will conduct a comprehensive examination." I was cornered. If they searched me now, they'd find the samples I'd taken. If they searched the well, they'd inevitably discover the hidden chamber. Either way, I would lose control of my discovery, and likely any leverage to save my farm. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, another vehicle approached, Dr. Morgan's white Ford F-150, now accompanied by a black sedan I didn't recognize. She parked and emerged quickly, followed by an older gentleman in a tweed jacket who moved with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "Deputy Director Collins," she called, approaching our group. "I thought I might find you here. Professor Abernathy and I were just discussing the Historical Society's prior claim to this site." Collins's expression hardened. "Dr. Morgan, this is a federal operation. Your Historical Society has no jurisdiction here." Perhaps not, the man she'd identified as Professor Abernathy interjected, but the Virginia Historical Preservation Act requires consultation with the State Historical Society before any potential historical site can be disturbed. I've brought the relevant documentation, including our previously filed intent to study this specific well structure. He held up a folder of official-looking papers. Collins seemed momentarily thrown by this unexpected obstacle. "We have a federal warrant, which I'm sure was properly obtained," Abernathy acknowledged, "but it doesn't supersede state historical preservation statutes. At minimum, the Society must be permitted to document the site before any materials are removed." Their arrival had created a crucial distraction. As Collins and Abernathy engaged in a heated discussion about jurisdictional priorities, Dr. Morgan caught my eye and gave a subtle nod toward the farmhouse. The message was clear. This diversion was intentional, giving me an opportunity to distance myself from the well and the evidence I carried. "If you'll excuse me," I said to no one in particular, "I need to prepare for the bank appraiser. He'll be here within the hour." Harlow moved to stop me, but Collins waved him off, still engaged with Abernathy. "Mr. Blackwell isn't going anywhere. Let's resolve this procedural matter first." I walked toward the house with deliberate casualness, fighting the urge to run. The weight of the coins and documents pressed against my side beneath my jacket, their historical and monetary value now secondary to their importance as evidence of my discovery. Once inside, I moved quickly to my bedroom, where I retrieved a small fireproof safe hidden in the back of my closet. I transferred the documents and coin pouch into it, then concealed the safe behind a loose floorboard under my bed, a hiding spot I'd created years ago for storing important family documents. Next, I called Uncle Elijah, keeping my voice low. "They're here. Treasury Department with warrants, and Westridge Development is somehow involved." "Did you find anything?" he asked immediately. "Yes, everything. The gold, documents, all of it. It's exactly where Grandfather's diagram indicated." His sharp intake of breath was audible even through the phone. "Have they searched you? Do they know you found it?" "Not yet." A historian from the Virginia Historical Society created a distraction that let me get back to the house. I've hidden samples as evidence, but they'll find the chamber as soon as they search the well properly. "Listen carefully," Elijah said, his voice taking on the crisp authority I remembered from my childhood. "Call Sarah. Tell her to contact Gerald Hoffman. He's an attorney who specializes in historical property rights. Then call the local news stations. The government and developers rely on operating without public scrutiny. Once cameras arrive, they'll be forced to proceed by the book. Uncle Elijah, they have federal warrants. They're going to take everything. They can take the physical items, yes," he acknowledged, "but they can't take the story, the discovery itself, not if you've documented it and others know. The historical significance alone could be enough to save the farm if leveraged properly." A knock at my front door interrupted our conversation. Through the window, I could see Collins and Harrington waiting impatiently on my porch. "I have to go," I told Elijah. "They're at the door. Remember, Thomas, that discovery is your birthright. Your ancestors protected it for generations. Don't let them take it without a fight." As I hung up and moved toward the door, I realized that the true value of what I'd found wasn't just in the gold coins or historical documents, but in the leverage they provided. Leverage to save my land, to honor my family's legacy, and perhaps to correct a historical narrative that had remained distorted for over 150 years. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Whatever happened next would determine not just my future, but the fate of 4 generations of Blackwell history buried in this soil. I opened the door to find Collins and Harrington standing shoulder to shoulder, their earlier pretense of separated. "Interests now abandoned. Mr. Blackwell," Collins began, "we need to discuss what you found in that well." As I said, I was conducting routine maintenance, I maintained, stepping aside to let them enter. The structure needed inspection after the recent heavy rains. Our imaging technology detected an anomaly in the well structure, a void that doesn't conform to standard well construction, Collins replied. Most old wells have irregularities, I said with a shrug. I can't speak to construction methods. From the 1800s, Harrington stepped forward. Thomas Westridge is prepared to structure a cooperative agreement. If you voluntarily disclose what you've found and cooperate fully with the recovery operation, Westridge will not only honor our purchase offer, but include a finder's fee of 5% of the historical value of any artifacts recovered. 5% of millions would certainly resolve my financial problems, but at the cost of surrendering both my discovery and my land. My phone rang. A local number I didn't recognize. "Excuse me," I said, stepping into the kitchen. "Mr. Blackwell? This is Gerald Hoffman, attorney at law. Your ex-wife contacted me regarding a potential historical discovery on your property and federal intervention. Uncle Elijah's recommended." "Attorney, Sarah had moved quickly. Are federal agents currently on your property?" he asked. "Yes, with warrants." "Have they removed anything yet or conducted a thorough search?" "Not yet. They're preparing to examine the well more closely." "Listen carefully," Hoffman said. "Do not sign anything. Do not make any verbal agreements. Under the Archaeological Resources Protection Act and the Virginia Antiquities Act, you have certain rights as the property owner, even with federal involvement. I'm on my way to you now." As we spoke, I noticed a news van from the local NBC affiliate turning onto my access road. I returned to the living room. "Gentlemen, it seems we'll have company. The local news has taken an interest in your activities." Through the window, we watched as the news van parked and a reporter and cameraman emerged. Dr. Morgan immediately approached them, gesturing animatedly toward the well and the house. "This complicates matters unnecessarily," Collins said, his composure slipping. "Mr. Blackwell, what you found is government property. Attempting to leverage the media won't change that fundamental legal reality." "I haven't claimed otherwise," I responded. "But proper archaeological protocols must be followed. Nothing should be removed without thorough documentation by qualified experts." Outside, Dr. Morgan and Professor Abernathy were speaking with the reporter. A second news vehicle, this one from the CBS affiliate in Staunton, was now approaching. "If you'll excuse me," I said, "I should probably speak with the press about what's happening on my property." "Mr. Blackwell," Harrington interjected desperately, "the offer I mentioned remains open, but only if we can resolve this situation amicably and quickly." Outside, the scene had transformed dramatically. 2 news crews had set up equipment, locals were beginning to gather at my property line, and a third vehicle, a sedan with Commonwealth of Virginia plates, had arrived. Dr. Morgan spotted me and waved me over to where she stood with Professor Abernathy and Catherine Chen, the lead anchor from the NBC affiliate. "Mr. Blackwell," Chen called out, "we understand federal agents are searching for Civil War artifacts on your property. Can you tell us what's happening?" I chose my words carefully. "This farm has been in my family for 4 generations. This morning, while conducting maintenance on a historic well structure, I discovered what appears to be a sealed chamber dating back to the Civil War era. The Treasury Department is now asserting ownership over anything found within that chamber." "And what exactly did you find?" she pressed. "I'm not at liberty to provide specific details at this time, as the discovery is still being documented. But I can confirm that the chamber appears to contain both artifacts and documents that may significantly impact our understanding of certain Civil War events in this region." Collins emerged from my house, clearly intent on controlling the narrative. "The department has received credible intelligence suggesting the presence of historical currency and documents related to Union Army operations during the Civil War," he stated smoothly. We're working cooperatively with Mr. Blackwell to properly identify and preserve these potentially significant artifacts. As Collins fielded questions, Professor Abernathy drew me aside. Your discovery has created quite a stir. If what you found matches Rebecca's family documents, this could be one of the most significant Civil War discoveries in decades. It matches, I confirmed in a low voice. Exactly as her great-grandfather described. But the Treasury Department is claiming everything. A BMW sedan parked beside the news vans. A man in his 50s emerged, carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Blackwell? Gerald Hoffman, he introduced himself with a firm handshake. I see things have escalated quickly. That's an understatement, I replied, relieved at his arrival. Good. Media presence, state historical representatives, and academic experts all serve as counterbalance to federal overreach. Do you have documentation of what you discovered? I nodded subtly. Inside, secured. Excellent. Our first priority is to ensure proper archaeological protocols, Hoffman stated firmly. I'll need to speak with Deputy Director Collins immediately. As Hoffman moved to intercept Collins, I found myself standing beside Dr. Morgan, watching as my quiet farm had transformed into the center of a complex intersection of historical significance, legal jurisdiction, and media attention. I didn't expect all this, I admitted to her. History has a way of demanding proper attention, she replied. What you found down there, it matches the letters, doesn't it? I nodded slightly. Your great-grandfather's account appears to be accurate. There are documents, gold coins, and evidence suggesting something much more complicated than a simple Confederate raid. You found the true account, and more, I confirmed. Whatever happened with that payroll shipment, it wasn't what the official history recorded. For the first time since discovering the chamber, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The truth hidden in that well had waited more than 150 years to be revealed. Now, with allies emerged and attention focused, perhaps that revelation could occur with the dignity and historical respect it deserved, and in the process might still save my family's farm from erasure. The standoff at the well continued through the early afternoon as more stakeholders arrived. My bank appraiser pulled up at precisely 2 p.m., looking bewildered by the circus that had engulfed what should have been a routine property assessment. Hoffman intercepted him immediately, explaining that extraordinary circumstances required postponement of the appraisal. To my relief, the appraiser agreed to reschedule, buying precious time in my foreclosure timeline. Gerald Hoffman proved worth every penny of whatever fee Sarah had negotiated. He systematically constructed a temporary coalition of interests. The State Historical Society, academic institutions, local media, and community preservation groups, all serving as counterweights to federal authority. His legal maneuvering secured a critical agreement. The well chamber would be jointly documented by a team including Treasury representatives, state historical experts, and my own selected specialists before anything was removed. This isn't ideal, Hoffman told me privately as we watched the preparations. They'll still claim the gold as government property, but we've ensured you'll receive full credit for the discovery, and more importantly, we've created leverage. Leverage for what? I asked. For negotiating the farm's future, he explained. Historical discoveries of this magnitude can lead to landmark designations, preservation grants, even tourism potential, none of which aligns with Westridge's development plans. As we spoke, Harrington paced near his navigator, engaged in an intense phone conversation with someone presumably higher up the Westridge chain of command. His gestures suggested frustration and recalculation. The joint documentation team was preparing to enter the well when a black Cadillac Escalade arrived, pulling up directly behind the Treasury vehicles. An elderly man emerged with assistance from the driver, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. despite his advanced age and the supporting cane he leaned upon. "Who's that?" I asked Hoffman, noting how Collins immediately straightened his posture and moved to greet the newcomer. "Maxwell Caldwell," Hoffman replied with evident surprise, "chairman of First Virginia Heritage Bank and one of the wealthiest men in the Commonwealth. His family has deep roots in this region dating back to colonial times." The Caldwell name triggered immediate recognition. Uncle Elijah had mentioned that my property was originally part of the Caldwell plantation before being divided and sold after the Civil War. "Caldwell," I repeated, "as in the original owners of this land?" "Exactly," Hoffman confirmed. "The Caldwells owned nearly half the county before the Civil War. Most of their holdings were sold or seized during Reconstruction, but Maxwell has spent decades reclaiming and restoring historic Caldwell properties. He's obsessed with his family's legacy." Caldwell moved with deliberate slowness toward where Collins and I stood, his eyes sharp despite his age, taking in every detail of the scene. "Deputy Director Collins," he acknowledged with a slight nod before turning to me. "And you must be Thomas Blackwell. I've been following your family's stewardship of this particular parcel for some time." His choice of words, following and stewardship, suggested a proprietary interest that immediately raised my guard. "Mr. Caldwell," I replied cautiously, "this is unexpected." "Is it?" he asked, his Virginia aristocrat's accent polished by generations of privilege. "I would have thought my interest obvious, given the history involved." Collins cleared his throat. "Mr. Caldwell has generously offered his family's historical records to assist our recovery operation. The Caldwell Plantation archives contain detailed documentation of this property during the Civil War period." Caldwell's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "My great-grandfather, Colonel James Caldwell, commanded the local Home Guard during the war. His journals mention this specific well and its special modifications." The implication was clear. The Caldwell family had known about the hidden chamber all along, perhaps had even been involved in its creation. "The Treasury Department appreciates your cooperation," Collins said deferentially. "Your historical insights will prove invaluable." Hoffman stepped closer to me, whispering urgently, "This changes things. Caldwell's involvement suggests competing historical claims beyond just the government's interest." Caldwell fixed his penetrating gaze on me. "Mr. Blackwell, I believe we have much to discuss regarding what you've discovered, perhaps somewhere more private than this theatrical spectacle." The arrival of Maxwell Caldwell had added yet another powerful player to the increasingly complex situation, one whose family's connection to my land predated even my own ancestors' ownership. Whatever secrets that well contained, they were clearly entangled with the Caldwell legacy in ways I was only beginning to understand. "I think we're fine discussing matters here," I replied to Caldwell, unwilling to be separated from my growing circle of allies. "Whatever historical connection your family has to this property, it's been Blackwell land for over a century." Caldwell's expression tightened momentarily. "I merely thought you might appreciate hearing certain historical context before it becomes public knowledge." Before he could elaborate, commotion erupted at the well. One of the agents had descended into the shaft and located the hidden chamber entrance. "Sir, we've found it. There's definitely a concealed room behind the north wall." All attention shifted to the well. Collins directed his team to deploy additional equipment, while Dr. Morgan and Professor Abernathy insisted on participating in the initial documentation. Amid this chaos, Harrington approached me, his expression revealing strain. "Thomas, we need to talk. Westridge is prepared to completely revise our offer." "I'm a bit preoccupied at the moment," I replied. "Listen to me," he pressed, lowering his voice. "Caldwell's involvement changes everything. Do you know who really owns Westridge Development? Maximum Capital Partners, Caldwell's private equity firm." I answered to him. This revelation jolted me. Westridge's persistent interest in my property hadn't been about typical development. It had been Caldwell working through proxies to reclaim his family's former land. "Why would he care so much about this particular property?" I asked. "I don't know the full history, but he's fanatical about reassembling the original Caldwell estate. This farm is one of the few remaining parcels he doesn't control." Dr. Morgan approached urgently. "They've opened the chamber. The Treasury team is trying to exclude our historians from the initial entry. At the well, a tense standoff had developed. Collins was insisting that his agents secure the site before allowing civilian experts to enter, while Professor Abernathy argued vehemently that simultaneous documentation was essential. "The chamber has remained sealed for over 150 years, Abernathy insisted. "The initial documentation must reflect multiple perspectives, not just the federal government's. This is a matter of national security and historical patrimony," Collins countered. I noticed Caldwell watching with an unsettling intensity, his eyes fixed on the well entrance with an almost predatory focus. The situation reached breaking point when Collins ordered his agents to begin removing items before the joint documentation team could properly catalogue them. Professor Abernathy physically blocked the well access, creating a moment of dangerous tension as federal agents moved to remove him. "This is completely unacceptable," Hoffman declared, positioning himself beside Abernathy. "You're violating our explicitly agreed-upon protocols." With cameras rolling and community members watching, Collins found himself in an impossible position. Heavy-handed tactics would play disastrously in the media, but allowing civilian control contradicted his orders. "Perhaps I can offer a solution," Maxwell Caldwell announced, stepping forward. "As both a representative of the original property owners and chairman of the bank currently holding Mr. Blackwell's mortgage, I propose a compromise." All eyes turned to Caldwell as he continued. "Let a joint team enter the chamber. One Treasury agent, one Historical Society representative, and Mr. Blackwell himself. Their examination will be recorded for complete transparency, and no items will be removed until properly documented." Collins hesitated, calculating the political implications of refusing such a reasonable-sounding proposal from someone of Caldwell's stature. "I'll agree to those terms," I said quickly, seizing the opportunity to regain access under more controlled circumstances. "As will the Historical Society," Dr. Morgan added. Backed into a corner, Collins reluctantly agreed. "Agent Harlow will represent Treasury interests, and everything must be recorded." As I checked my equipment, Hoffman pulled me aside. "Be extremely vigilant down there. Document everything thoroughly. And remember, Caldwell didn't offer this compromise out of generosity. He wants something specific from that chamber. Something he doesn't want publicly discovered before he can control the narrative." With those unsettling words in mind, I prepared to return to the chamber that had already transformed my quiet struggle to save the farm into something far more complex, a multi-layered conflict over history, legacy, and secrets long buried. Beneath Blackwell's soil, the descent into the well was tense and silent. Agent Harlow led the way, followed by Dr. Morgan, with me bringing up the rear. Each of us wore body cameras provided by the Historical Society, ensuring multiple records of whatever we discovered. The well shaft felt different now, no longer a solitary exploration, but the focus of intense scrutiny from the gathering above. When we reached the hidden door, I demonstrated the mechanism for opening it, revealing the chamber exactly as I'd left it hours earlier. The beam of our combined lights illuminated the space, casting dramatic shadows across the wooden crates and earthen walls. "My God," Dr. Morgan whispered, professional composure momentarily abandoned as she took in the untouched Civil War-era artifacts. "It's all here, exactly as the letters described." Arlo maintained a stoic expression, but even he couldn't fully conceal his amazement at the pristine condition of the chamber and its contents. "We'll need to catalogue everything before any items are moved," he stated, mechanically following protocol despite his evident awe. As we methodically documented the chamber's contents, opening each crate and recording its contents, the true significance of the discovery became increasingly clear. This wasn't simply a hidden cache of Union gold, but evidence of a complex conspiracy involving both northern and southern interests. The ledger titled "The True Account" proved most revealing. As Dr. Morgan read passages aloud for the recording, an extraordinary narrative emerged. Sergeant William Morgan, her great-grandfather, had discovered that the Union payroll he was escorting was being used in an elaborate scheme. Certain Union officers were collaborating with local Confederate sympathizers, including Colonel James Caldwell, to fund a private militia that profited from the conflict while officially serving neither side. "This is why the gold disappeared," Dr. Morgan explained, her voice tight with emotion. "My great-grandfather didn't steal it or lose it to Confederate raiders. He discovered the conspiracy and hid the payroll to prevent it from financing further bloodshed." Harlow's expression grew troubled as more documents revealed the extent of the operation: weapons trafficking, protection schemes targeting local farmers, and strategic manipulation of both Union and Confederate forces to prolong the conflict for personal gain. "These allegations implicate prominent historical figures from both sides," he acknowledged reluctantly. "If authenticated, this would significantly revise our understanding of certain Civil War operations in this region." The most damning evidence came in a sealed oilskin packet at the bottom of the largest crate: personal correspondence between Colonel Caldwell and senior Union officers, detailing their profit-sharing arrangements and strategies for maintaining their covert partnership. Despite official hostilities, "Maxwell Caldwell can't possibly know these documents exist," Dr. Morgan said quietly. "His family's historical reputation would be destroyed if this became public." The implications struck me with sudden clarity. That's why he's been so determined to acquire this property, not just to reassemble the family estate, but to control what might be found here. As we completed our documentation, having recorded every item in meticulous detail without removing anything from the chamber, I felt the weight of history and responsibility settling on my shoulders. What we'd discovered wasn't just valuable. In monetary terms, it was a missing piece of American history, one that powerful interests had worked for generations to keep buried. "What happens now?" I asked as we prepared to ascend. "Now," Dr. Morgan replied with quiet determination. "We let history speak for itself. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."